So I don't know if it's just my want for more mystery in the world or if I need to be put on some sort of watch list, but I've always enjoyed studying and learning about different conspiracy theories and the supernatural. Anything from Kennedy's assassination to Freemasonry, I'll eat that shit up. And I think a lot of that has to do with, what I grew up watching as a kid. Instead of the normal shit like SpongeBob, I grew up watching a show called Unsolved Mysteries. I grew up watching it. My dad grew up watching it back in the 80s. It was a really long running television program, and it dealt with subjects that I should not have been exposed to as a child. I remember my friends telling me about how they were afraid to go out in the morning to brush their teeth because they were convinced that Freddy Fazbear or Slender Man would be out there ready to get them. Not me, though. I slept with my lights on for a solid week in the third grade because I was convinced that the tree outside my window was actually the chupacabra, and every time the branches would rattle against it and make noise, I would shit myself. In the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, the chupacabra existed, and it existed just to torment me. So, unsolved. Oh, I've got a visitor. Guys, we've got a special guest today. This is my kitty Nick. He's saying hi to you all. Mwah. Oh, he wants down. Okay. He's my best friend. I would die for him. He doesn't give a shit about me. So, like I was saying before I was so pleasantly interrupted, Unsolved Mysteries definitely had some sort of impact on my development as a child. Now, if you watch reruns of the show, you'll notice that a majority of the subject matter covered by the program deals with things like unsolved murders or stuff we would now associate with topics like missing 411. But in between those episodes, sometimes they would have things covering cryptids, the supernatural, and my favorite, conspiracy theories. The idea that there's always been some larger force at play and we're only serving out whatever its bidding is unknowingly has always fascinated me, and it's something that I still like to research, I still like to talk about to this day. One of the theories that was covered on Ancient Aliens that was like laser printed into my brain because of the sheer idiocy behind it is the ancient astronauts theory. Now, the ancient astronauts theory is something that I'm sure a lot of you are at least somewhat familiar with, but I guess to give a brief overview for those who may not be as familiar with the topic as others, the ancient astronauts theory is the idea that throughout history, aliens, or ancient astronauts, as they like to call them, have either intervened with or helped to perpetuate human history across the world. From ancient Egypt to Central America, all across the world, all sorts of evidence has been gathered to support this wildly outrageous claim. Now, the idea that humans have interacted with extraterrestrials has been around since the early 1900s. That's whenever, subject matter like that first started to be created. But they gained mainstream popularity in the 60s and 70s due to the rise of sci-fi and pop culture and the space race between the US and Soviet Union. Now, I want to take a small break just to say that even though I do know a bit about these theories, I don't believe them one bit, and I'll get into why later. But if you couldn't already tell by how I'm reporting all of this information to you guys, I firmly believe that everything I'm about to tell you is horseshit. Okay, that's all the break. One of the most widely known theories that is encompassed by the ancient astronauts hypothesis, and I'm using hypothesis very liberally, is the belief that ancient Egyptians could not build the pyramids without extraterrestrial technology or intervention. Now, the way these theorists perpetuate this idea is by constantly questioning every single possible explanation for how the pyramids were actually built. They'll find small little gaps in our knowledge gained by legitimate archaeological evidence and inserting aliens in that picture somewhere. The theory used to be that all the Egyptians were a bunch of bumbling idiots living out in the middle of the desert until aliens intervened and taught them, fundamental geometry. Like, the idea was that the Egyptians couldn't even wrap their heads around a pyramid because 4 triangles on a square base is such a wild concept to understand. Then, when we were able to prove that the Egyptians weren't a bunch of bumbling idiots and could build the pyramids, they switched to, well, they can't cut the bricks. They didn't have the technology to cut the bricks out, the 2-ton stones. Then archaeologists proved that they were in fact able to cut the stones with commonly used tools such as a saw, sand, and water.
Wow.
Mind blown, right? We've even found stones that would have been used for the pyramids that were rejected for being imperfect. And, those giant obelisks that we associate with ancient Egypt, we've found those still in the ground that were halfway cut out but not finished due to things like cracks or other factors. Anyways, these discoveries only led to the crackpots doubling down and saying, well, they couldn't have been able to transport those bricks all the way to the site where the pyramids were built without alien technology. Which, I'm sure you guessed it already, archaeologists were able to prove that yes, they could transport 2-ton stones. And the cycle continues and continues and continues until you're all the way back at square one. Which I personally don't like how the pyramids are associated with aliens, because I like to think that, these monuments are a testament to the human spirit. And that sounds dumb, but it's nice to think that even with such little tools, we were able to create such wondrous feats of engineering. Another smoking gun used by these idiots is the images of boats and helicopters, or what is believed to be by them boats and helicopters carved onto Egyptian reliefs, which I will admit, these images are pretty confusing and pretty interesting to look at, and for those who aren't well versed in Egyptology, they do look like boats and they do look like helicopters, but the explanation for them is so simple that it shuts out any discussion of them actually being modern technology portrayed in ancient times. You see, there was this trend amongst many pharaohs where, in order to either bolster their own legacies or to erase the legacy of an unpopular pharaoh before them, names carved into hieroglyphs would be recut to fit the new pharaoh's name. And these supposed boats and helicopters are a great example of this old trend, because the pharaoh responsible for these carvings, the infamous Ramses II, was replacing his father's name with his own. Hey guys, editing Dylan here. I just wanted to say that to further hammer the nail into the proverbial coffin of these helicopters, Ramses, whenever he was replacing his father's name with his own, carved his name even further into the stone in order to really solidify it and to keep it from happening to him. Now, the way the Egyptian naming system worked for pharaohs was you had their names, like you had Ramses, Tutankhamun, Akhenaten, and then you also had almost like titles. There would be people with names like Defender of the People of Egypt, or, Ruler of the Nile and all lands beyond. I'm just coming up with those off the top of my head, but they like giving titles to make these pharaohs almost into mythical beings. So if you compare Ramses II's titular name against his father's, you see that there's a lot that lines up, especially with the hieroglyph, but those differences made it to where whenever replacing Ramses' father's name with his own, some of the reliefs ended up looking like what would nowadays be considered speedboats and helicopters. Now, I have my own theory on the ancient aliens hypothesis, which makes more sense to me than the original theory itself does. And this is gonna be wild. This is gonna be wild, guys. I don't want you to think that I'm, crazy, but I believe that the ancient astronaut conspiracy is deep rooted in racism. I know, right? I know. It's so controversial. The idea that people back in the 60s were racist? What? What? No way! What? All jokes aside, I can say with almost 100% certainty that the reason people associate these great feats of engineering with aliens is simply because people don't want to admit that non-white cultures could create such beautiful works. Now, I can say this without a shadow of doubt in my mind because in research for this video, I picked up on a little trend in the supposed evidence of alien interventions. Aliens have only ever provided their technology specifically to countries or cultures who aren't in Europe. 99% of all evidence of aliens in Europe have to do with religion rather than technology. One example that I can remember during research of this video, I saw that, Constantine the Great, how supposedly he got a vision from Christ and he painted a cross on all his soldiers' shields, and then they won the battle and Constantine became emperor. It wasn't God, it was actually an alien. The only widespread theory of alien technology in Europe is related to the Antikythera mechanism. I'm definitely not saying that right, but we've already figured out that it's most likely just an early navigation tool for sailors. So I guess to leave you all with a little bit of a lesson here, if you ever come across anything relating to aliens that gets you thinking, maybe there's some credibility here, never attribute to aliens what can easily be explained by racism. Now, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching this video. I do want to say, I know it's different from what I've previously put out on this channel, but since it's so early, I guess, in my YouTube career, if you can even call it that, I just kind of want to probe around and experiment with different things, and subjects like this are something that's not only always caught my attention, but they're also things that I'm easily able to talk about and write scripts about. I know I missed uploading last week. I was on vacation in Austin, Texas. It felt like all 35 of my subscribers were, messaging me, when's the next video? When's the next video? And we're just going feral for the fact that, they didn't get to see me last week. And for them, I apologize. But, as I said, thank you all for coming back to watch this one. I almost forgot to do the spin. Anyways, I appreciate you all sticking around to the end of the video and listening to me ramble like a crazy person. It really does mean a lot to me. I may have only 35 subscribers, but like I said, I appreciate all 35 of you. And yeah, that's all I've got for you now. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.